Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. My name is Renee Borrero. I am an EL Family Resource Specialist in the Boston Public Schools Office of English Learners. Today's workshop is on immigration experience. This is a part of our virtual Immigrant Pride Week of Action series in support of immigrant and undocumented students and families. One of our primary goals is to increase educators' awareness and understanding of immigrant and undocumented students and families' experiences. Today's meeting is being recorded to serve as a resource for those who couldn't make it here today. I'd like to start by introducing our panelist, Bala Chingo Kalel. She's a BPS parent. She's from Guatemala. Mina Ganas from El Salvador. She's also a BPS parent. Samar Faraj from Egypt, a BPS parent. Nazra Noor, she's Somali. She's a BPS graduate, BPS graduate and undergraduate student at Boston University. Yo-Yo Yao, Chinese, community member, program director at Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center. Maria Barbosa, Cabo Verdean, BPS staff. Punda Nguyen, Vietnamese BPS staff. And our backup panelist is Audrey Martinez Cudapacam, a BPS parent. And with that, I'll turn things over to Ms. Vera Johnson. Vera is the director of NACC at Boston Public Schools Office of English Learners. She will be moderating today's conversation, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. Thank you for being here this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again to our panelists who are going to share their insights today as we continue different events and conversations regarding the BPS Immigrant Pride Week of Action. So thank you to all our panelists today. Our first question that we have for our panelists is, who did you come with and what did you leave behind?
I can go, Vera. This is, I'm sorry. This is Maria Barbosa. I am one of the family resource specialists with Boston Public Schools. My parents, my mother and father, my older sister, they came first to the United States in 1976. And my five sisters and I, we stayed in Cabo Verde with our grandmother. After 3 years, they just wanted to make sure that they settle first and have a home before we can come. My grandmother got sick before they were ready to bring us. So since there was no one to take care of us besides our grandparents, my mother went back to Cabo Verde and brought my sisters and I and our grandmother. So there were 5 of us children and my grandmother and my mother. And the ones that I left behind, I left all my friends, all of my cousins and family members and my home, to go to a place that I didn't know the language or anyone except for my immediate family. I think that was the question. I don't know.
Yeah, it was. Yo-Yo, can you share with us some of your experiences coming in here and what you felt you left behind in coming here to US?
Yeah, I could share because I'm the only one community member. So I want to share some of the experience for people I serve, especially immigrant as well as undocumented immigrants. So some of my constituents come here, they left their family. And I just could quote one of the example, a gentleman, he come here because he want to have a better life. And then when his visa expire, he will not be able to like renew his visa. And then he become an illegal immigrants. And then she worked under the table in a restaurant industry. And then take him 20 years to bring his son and his wife to come here. And the journey is very traumatic. And we work with him to go through all the legal process to be able to have a family reunifications. That experience just so intense. And that's just one of the examples I want to share. Yeah.
Thank you. Fungi, would you like to share any, what your experience was on coming to the United States?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Phong Dais. I'm the EL Family Resource Specialist, and I work with the Vietnamese community. I came with my families, my mom, my parents, and my older brothers. You know, like since like on the April 30, 1975, the fall of Saigon, which is the end of the Vietnam War, that prompted the first large scale of the wave of immigration to the United States or like out the country, right? And then majority of them is like, lastly of them is like military personnel who work for the US military or South Vietnam government during that time. And the second wave during that time is the Vietnamese refugees. They, you know, of boat people. A lot of people say boat people because like they arrive, they using the boat to escape Vietnam during that time. And I came to the United States on the third wave, which is like after the US come out the Humanities Act to sponsor the families, you know, like the South Vietnam government or whoever worked for the US government have sent to the re-education camp after the communists took over Vietnam. So my father was one of them. So after my father came back, you know, when he left, I just born. I don't know, I didn't know his face, not know him and anything at all. So when after he released from re-education camp, I'm thinking about like, I'm on the first grade at that time. And our life, we live very horrible during that time because the government, the communist government give us a lot of issue and trouble. But luckily, you know, the Humanity Act is coming out, so we able to get sponsor and come to the United States during that time. Yeah.
I'm also the daughter of immigrant parents. My parents immigrated to the US, and I was the first one born in my family in the United States. And I know often when they would talk about coming to the United States, they describe with nostalgia the things that they left behind.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to start with Nasra and then Audrey. What was the most difficult, the hardest part about leaving your country, your community, to come here to the United States?
Sorry to interrupt. Vera, can we have the Spanish interpreter rules explain how to access the interpretation? We have a Spanish speaking parent here.
Okay, yes, go ahead. Hi, Melody, can you let us know when we can move forward?
Yes. Yes, I heard you. And English speakers, please make sure you are in the English channel. And for Spanish speaking participants, please make sure you also select Spanish. And if you need any assistance, please reach out to us through chat.
Can I just say that in Spanish, Melody?
Oh, yes, please go ahead, Renee.
Para los participantes que necesitan interpretación en español, por favor, en la parte inferior de su pantalla está el icono de un globo terráqueo donde dice Interpretation. Por favor, dele clic ahí y elija español. Okay.
So I can answer the question now?
Yes. Thank you, Nasra.
So you asked about my immigration and what was the most difficult part of getting comfortable with, kind of?
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing with us your experience as the child of immigrants, and if you also can give us a little insight on what was the most difficult, hardest part about leaving your country or community.
Personally, I was born here. However, I didn't speak English at first. So I think my journey with that was more so assimilating in just because I'm the oldest. So it was kind of assimilating into the culture outside of my home, because as the oldest to parents who didn't necessarily need to speak English in their house, I just had my vocabulary took a while to build up. And even in like the 5th grade, I didn't know how to say living room in English. So I was still learning that. I can speak on what was difficult for my parents, because as much as it was kind of hard for me to assimilate, I was a child, so I found it easier. But my parents have a hard time with the culture clash. And in turn, I have a hard time with the culture clash, because America is a pretty individualistic country, while Somalia is more focused on the community. I think most Somali people have an awareness of their neighbors and just they go out of their way to help out. But sometimes it takes a while for American people to see that you're struggling, because they're kind of more focused on where they're heading. So my parents I kind of clash with them like that, because sometimes where I should be looking out for them, I'm kind of thinking about my goals. But you know, it's not that hard to overcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that insight, you know, as a child of immigrants. I also was a child of immigrants, as I shared earlier. So I do understand, like, sort of like a way of code switching. You're explaining to your family, you know, how things are here, but you're also respecting the cultural values that your family is bringing with them to this new place. Audrey, would you like to share with us what was the most difficult, hardest part about leaving your country community? Yo-Yo, in your work with your community, what are you hearing from your community members as the most difficult, hardest part about coming here, about leaving their country and their community? Because we often hear about the good part, like you're going to America or et cetera. You know, America has a reputation of the land of milk and honey, but we also know that people leave their homelands, which they love very dearly. So what do you hear from your community members in your work with them?
Yeah, before I share a gentleman's story, now I want to share some of our youth and moms' experience. So I remember a youth shared with us is when he did the family reunifications, because the father come here first, and then the mom and himself stay in China. And then when he is eligible to come to United States, almost is like in his high school age, he already have a lot of friends, and he speak native Chinese language. English is very hard for him. And then he even questioned his mom, say, why we have to go to United States? You know, I haven't seen our father for so many years. He doesn't feel a sense belongings when he come here, and it was very hard for him to make new friends because the language barrier as well as the cultural barrier, because he said he did not live in United States culture. And similar, like NASA mentioned about in China, is more focused on family culture, family value, as well as a community networking. And when he doesn't have all this social support network, when he come here, has been really hard because he has no friends, and he cannot stop thinking about his friend in China, and just very social isolated. And for teenage, this is very most difficult transitions. He feel like he be forced to come here. It's not his wish. And sometimes take people years to readjust the life here. And sometimes people cannot just integrate their life here.
Thank you. Paula, can you share with us what was the most difficult part about coming here, immigrating?
Paula, ahora te toca.
Ruth, could you please select the English channel?
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Paula, yo soy de Guatemala. Pues, ¿por qué estoy acá? Vine a este país porque pues en mi país existe mucha delincuencia, entonces nosotros estábamos pasando momentos muy difíciles en mi país y también sufrimos por discriminación por ser indígenas. Esa fue una de las, ¿cómo le podría decir? De las cosas de las cuales nosotros decidimos inmigrar para este país.
Our interpreter.
No sé si puedo continuar.
Yes, you can. Sí, puedes continuar. So Paula just shared with us that in her country there's discrimination. She was discriminated against. There's violence and gangs in her country, and so that was one of the reasons why she decided to come to the United States to immigrate here. Going back to children that are coming here or children of immigrants, Nasra, what are your solutions or suggestions, since you also have graduated from Boston Public Schools and you grew up in a home where you had immigrant parents, as we're looking at our southern border and we're seeing that there are many children that are unaccompanied or undocumented that are trying to come in or that are here, how would you suggest, what would be some of your suggestions for schools and for teachers and educators to support these children that are coming in? And I'd also like Yo-Yo to follow up to Nasra.
Well, growing up, I didn't have the resources that are available now. And I know that OEL is trying to kind of transition from like bilingual learning into multilingual learning. So I think that alone is actually really helpful for people who are just trying to learn English, because as you said, these kids are at the border. So it's very limited their access to other people who speak, not necessarily other people who speak Spanish, but people who speak English. They're gonna stay within their community and they're gonna only talk to Spanish speakers. So when they get here, it's kind of crazy to give them the same education that I had where I was forced to learn English. It's better that they learn in a multilingual way. So that's my suggestion.
Thank you. And Yo-Yo, can you share some of your insights on this question?
Sure. Before I address like the social isolations, so I think most important part is to help those individual students make some connections, either with friends or just introduce someone. They maybe go through similar passes like the alum or people like big brothers to help those individuals to get through it. And sometimes it could be just like regular check-in to see how they are doing, what kinds of support they need. And it could really help those individuals feel like be integrated or be included in a classroom setting or in an educational setting. And then the other thing is if the school have any resources related to community-based organizations or youth program or anything, could just give to those individuals or their family, so they will be able to connect not only just within the school but also in their community. So I think if we could connect all this part together, it might be able to help those individuals to break the social isolations.
Thank you. The next question is for one of our Spanish panelists, Paula, so the interpreter can get ready. What was it like when you first arrived? Paula, you described what you were leaving behind in Guatemala, but what was it like when you first arrived? Can you share with us your experiences when you first arrived?
Pues cuando nosotros recién llegamos, pues tuvimos que pasar muchas cosas difíciles. Si estamos hablando sobre inmigración, sobre cómo salir de inmigración. Yo estuve en una casa hogar 21 días junto con mi niña, y el proceso que le hacen a uno de preguntas o sobre del por qué nosotros queremos estar en este país fue muy difícil para mí. Mi hija estuvimos como, cuando llegamos, recién llegamos, los primeros 3 días que estuvimos con migración, solo nos daban agua pura y un sándwich, y para mí pues eso fue muy difícil porque yo le daba a mi niña la porción mía para que ella comiera. Entonces yo no estuve comiendo en esos días porque pues primero no era una comida saludable, porque era de los 3 días solo fue eso, una botella de agua y un sándwich con jamón y ya. Entonces eso fue muy difícil para mí y pues hasta ahora no lo olvido. Y luego nos fuimos a la casa hogar por 21 días hasta que ellos dijeron de que sí, ok, pueden irse. Pero creo que yo sé que no somos de acá, que nuestro país no es pero creo que es algo traumático y difícil para cada familia que enfrentamos poder estar en una ciudad muy diferente a la nuestra. Pero nosotros, bueno, yo lo hice pensando en mi hija, en su futuro, en que no viva lo que yo viví en mi país o que sufra todo lo que quizá nosotros a veces sufrimos en nuestro país. Y otra de las cosas que ha sido difícil, pues claro, como todos sabemos, es nuestro idioma, porque mi idioma mío es español, y entonces el inglés ha sido para mí algo que sí me ha costado demasiado, hasta ahora me sigue costando. A mi niña también le cuesta bastante en su escuela, y entonces todo eso ha sido muy difícil para nosotros y para mi familia, pues estar a la sintonía de este país, pero sí son cuestiones que son muy difíciles para mi familia.
Thank you, gracias.
Ajá.
Okay, so Paula just shared with us her experiences coming to the United States. First, she was in a center or a home for recent arrivals. And the first experiences were being asked a lot of questions on why she was here and why she wanted to come into the country, and having that kind of anxiety answering those questions and trying to figure out what would be next. And then she shared, unfortunately, the conditions of the center, the place that she was located, that she had a ration of sandwiches and water, which wasn't a very nutritious meal. But she would give her, as a mother, she would give her portion to her child. So she talked about the hard circumstances that are going on that was going on in the center where she was located. And now that she's here, you know, she's still thinking about why she came. The reason she came to the country was for a better future for her daughter. But the next steps now that they're here is learning English. And, you know, English can be difficult to learn, but she and her daughter are trying their very best to learn. So thank you, Paula, for sharing this, you know, insightful, realistic story with us. For Nasra, what does it mean to you to be an American, your identity, an American identity, and what does it mean to be part of the American experience?
I actually struggled with that a lot growing up because, like I said earlier, I was more immersed in Somali culture. But at the same time, I did have aspects of like being American, kind of being more individualistic. But my experience with being American, I've just learned to define it as being Somali American. I don't think I should focus too much on being Somali or too much on being American. It's kind of hard to put myself like where I would put myself on a spectrum, like leaning more Somali American. So I've just decided that I'm not going to force myself to fit into either category because how can I? That's not my experience. My experience is both of those things. So it was really difficult for me because growing up, my parents would make fun of me for being too American. So I was kind of upset about that. So I always tried to be very Somali, and I kind of forgot some of my Somali after being in America, like my entire life, but also like interacting with students who don't speak my language. So because I forgot part of my Somali, they were making fun of me and I wanted to be more Somali. But in like 2015, I went to Somalia and noticed the culture there was completely different than here. So at some point, I just decided that I'm just going to be myself and I don't have to fit into either one.
Thank you, Nasra. And one of our panelists, Samir, is here with us. She can only be with us for a little while. So Samir, we just want to get some of your reflections on what you left behind when you came to the US and what has been the most difficult part about leaving your country or your community.
Yes, for what I left behind me in the country is the culture, because there is a different from the Egyptian culture and the American culture. But I'm trying to adapt here or adapt my culture here as much as I can for me and my two sons. I came here because of my son to find a treatment for him, my younger son, and then he joined the school, Boston Public School, and my older son also joined Boston Public School. For both, I have two different challenges for them. For the first one, the older one, he has a hyperactivity, and he found hard time in the school to manage this in the beginning, especially with the different culture, how they had managed this in my country and how the teacher can find hard time to manage here this hyperactivity. And then when they have like a lot of troubles or how to make a friend, this makes me so upset because he can't adapt. But for me, I feel like the children, they don't have more troubles to how to adapt to themselves or their culture like the adult when they be here. I find like we have a lot of immigrant resources, but we don't have a practical not resources, but practical help for these immigrant people, whatever what is the language where they come from, you know. Your question about what is the challenges for me, or
Yeah.
yes, for me the big challenge is my son, who can adapt to his school and with his teacher and making friends. I have been like 3 years now, so now it's better than before. My other son, has a muscular dystrophy, severe, and he's on IEB program in the school. In the beginning, I didn't understand too much about how they will support him more, and I'm trying to like make a balance between what I have in my country and what I have here. It took time for me, but now I think it's better than before, but it takes time.
Thank you, Samir. Samir is one of our BPS parents, and she's from Egypt. Samir, if you could, before you, I know we know you have to leave, if you could just briefly share with us, BPS, we do receive quite a few children that come in from different parts of the world for medical treatments or for health issues as families are seeking resources. What are some of the resources that you have found most helpful to you in the district in terms of handling the unique situations that your sons are experiencing?
For me, it's the special education here in Boston Public School. I like them, and also how they are try to make different resources for different immigrant people. I remember when the first I came to the Welcome Center, I didn't know about the IEB program, but they make an appointment with me and try to visit me at home and see how I'm living and how's my son, and how's, it's not like they evaluate him, and in the same time they take in the consideration that I'm not live here anymore before, and they try to figure out how they can support me or help me. So for the special education department, they are so good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next question that we have for our panelists. Last year, the school district had to close last March 2020 due to the COVID pandemic. So the school system was on an extended school closure for several months as the district, like other school districts across the nation, determined and developed a plan to bring school children back to school safely. What are you hearing and what are you seeing and hearing from immigrant families you serve about their experiences and how they are coping with COVID-19? So Yo-Yo and Maria and Fengdai, if you can just share with us a little of what you're hearing from the communities that you're serving as they're coping with COVID-19.
So I could start it. COVID-19 have an impact in Chinatown community since January 2020, even though United States has not closed on that time. A lot of our adult education students, they travel back from China. They already heard about coronavirus, and then they even concerned about people not wearing masks. And then when they wear a mask in a public transit, they will be the subject of discriminations and racism. People will say, you go back to your country, you have virus. But for their perspective, they want to protect other people and protect themselves. But they feel really hurt when people say that. So the situations did not reduce. We all hear all the news, it just get increased, and the anti-Asian racism have been impacting all different people's life. And we also hear a lot of parents are very concerned about not only just their children's safety coming back to the school, and also their elders. And it feels like they are doing two pandemic. One is COVID-19, the other one is racism. And people just have extremely fear, and as well as need a lot of financial support. Most of the Chinatown restaurant workers lost their job early on during the pandemic, and housing issue is a huge. We have so many family members live in the same unit. It could be just like 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom. And if one person's be infected by COVID-19, other people have no place to isolate themselves or have to share the bathroom. And it's just huge for the community to bear all this stress. And I do hope when the children's ready come back to BPS, the educator be more mindful on where they are now and how they feel in terms of safety and health in the school setting.
Thank you. Maria?
Yes, thank you, Vera. So within the Cape Verdean community, COVID-19 hit really hard. Between Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, East Boston, on all these communities, in the beginning, they did not believe that this virus was, that COVID-19 virus was true. So as they were sent home to stay home from work, which means loss of position and also loss of schooling for their children, and they actually sort of immigrated with each other. They wanted to, that was their time to go see families, grandparents, and the notion that I cannot speak for any of them, but I don't believe that they listen to the news. And if they do, it's not the American news. It's probably somewhere from Brazil or from Cabo Verde, where they, at the time, they haven't even heard of the virus. Many of the grandparents around here, the elderly, suffered a lot. And families, I made hundreds of phone calls. In every household that I called, maybe 1 out of 10 did not have COVID-19. When it hit them, it was really hard, and it was too late for them to do anything except to accept the situation that they found themselves in. Cape Verdean families, they're very close-knit family. They love to visit each other. People are in your house all the time, and they will never turn you away. But that became their downfall when it came to this virus. What I heard is that families were in very, very difficult time, especially when they were losing their elderly families. You would call a household, everyone, even the kids, would have the virus. And food became an issue, a problem, and they couldn't really go out. So it was up to the community and us to reach out to them and see how we can provide food, how we can provide water, how we can provide resources on the virus. So it was, it took them by surprise after many weeks of not believing. And that's what I got from the community that I worked with.
Thank you. And Fangdai, do you have any additional comments? All right, so our next question is, this is for our parents. If we could start with Audrey. So our next question is for our parents, Audrey, Samir, and then Paula, because we're gonna do the interpretation for Paula. What resources, what support do you wish you first had when you first immigrated? And what resources do you still need? So if we can start with Audrey and then Samir and Paula, what resources, what support do you wish you had when you first immigrated? And what
Wait.
resources do you still need?
Hi, I'm Audrey. Would it be okay if I let Samar go first? Just because she's at work, she's taking her lunch time just to participate, and I know she has to go back to work, and she
Perfect.
has
That's
an
fine.
amazing experience. So yeah.
Thank you, Samar. And then Audrey, and then Paula, because we need Paula to have the interpretation. Thank you. Samir.
Yes, for the resources for the immigrant, actually, I was talking with Audrey about this. We have a lot of resources for the immigrant people here, especially here in Boston, which is good. But we need to interact with more people have gone with the same experience. Like for this organization, if we have more immigrant in this organization or working on these resources, it will be very helpful for the people to, the immigrant people to work with these people, like the more hiring for immigrant people, like social worker, or the people who are responsible for the resources that help the immigrant people, like for housing, for financially, for food, water, anything. If we have more immigrant involved in this organization, it will be like more practical to help these people more and more. That's my only concerning, but we have amazing resources here and a lot of organizations that can help the immigrant people. But I think we have something or misunderstanding for how to interacting or communicate more with the people that have the same culture, same language, and same needs, because it's make a little bit different when you come from different culture. Your needs will be different and your priorities will be different. Some people need more emotional support more than anything, and some people need more like the essential or the basis for the life if they need it more and more.
Thank you. And is there anything, we know that you're on lunch break and we thank you. Before we move on to our other panelists, is there anything you could share with us about support for children with learning disabilities during this COVID situation, especially for those children who may still be remote?
Yes, this is as an example for my son. I kept him at home of the COVID situation, and I'm not sure about the safety because he's verbal, but he has a trach and for his breathing and get infected very easily. So that's why I kept him at home with his one-to-one nurse. But for example, he has to be online every time at the school. I find hard time I leave him at home with his nurse, but I find hard time to put him online on time, or someone can help him with the school. He got all the therapy, but he can't got like PT online or OT online. This is very hard. And also he needs one to help him, like a shadow teacher or teacher assistant to help him for the school activities. I miss this like for him, I miss this situation, and sometimes he got a lot of learning, but with himself, but without any help but he will need help. And for also all, because I have some parents, they have student with disability, mental disability also. It's very hard to keep them at home without someone to help them other than mom and dad during the COVID situation. So we need to see some resources for these special needs kids during their remote learning.
Thank you for that valuable insight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you for sharing. We know you're on your break, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
So for our next two panelists, just to restate the question that we originally asked was, what support do you wish you had when you first immigrated? And then what supports do you still think you need, or that you think will still be helpful, if not for you, for other immigrants that are coming in? So we're talking to two of our parents, starting with Audrey and then Paula.
Thank you for having me. And I actually, well, I would like to talk more about a lot of the families at Winship. I'm actually a volunteer DLAC member for the District English Learner Advisory Committee, and then also for the School Parent Council at Winship. And the thing is that when I was 13, I had to move to Mexico because of a messy divorce situation between my parents, and I lost 2 years of school, and I didn't know any Spanish, and so that made me very sensitive to a lot of the issues that families face when they come here. And then when I came back to the US for college, because I finished my high school in Mexico, I think the big challenge I found was the assumptions that people make about you. Because I realized that being in Mexico, people assume that because I was American, I was smart, I was intelligent, I was well educated. But when I came back to the US, I saw how so many assumptions were the reverse. You know, that I was poor, that I needed help, that I wasn't a good student. And so I think that was very frustrating. And so when I think you asked about like resources that would be really helpful for immigrants. And one thing that I've noticed, especially in supporting a lot of families, is that there's an assumption oftentimes about where people are coming from and not really trying to understand what are their needs, kind of like what Samar was saying. And one big challenge that I found during the time of COVID was that there are a lot of resources out there in Boston, but in order to access them, you need to be literate. You need to understand how the system works. And you need to have access or be able to use a computer. For example, we knew that a lot of families were going hungry, and we sent out a survey to find out who needed food. And there were families I knew that definitely had told me they needed help, but they couldn't fill out the survey. And so that becomes like a barrier in helping. And a lot of them also, they didn't have emails, they didn't know how to use emails. And so I also, like, parents would reach out to me for asking for help because teachers would send, you know, the Zoom link and like the assignments for school, and they didn't know how to access that. But then the expectation is that their child has to be participating in Zoom. And so I tried to make, you know, teachers, some, I don't know all of the teachers, but those that I did know, I tried to make them aware of this. And, but it was really challenging because I think also sometimes because they're on like, and I used to be a teacher, so I know how hard it can be from the other side. And so they didn't know how to help the parents, or maybe they couldn't, you know, because they are also stretched then. And so there's a big divide. And then I think in that space, because there isn't communication, there's a lot of assumptions being made on both ends about parents and like their interest in children doing well. Like I saw in the newspaper how some parents were being reported to the Department of Child Care because they weren't responding. But when I was working with like helping these families, I was seeing that, you know, they didn't know how to get onto Zoom, and all the instructions were being sent in English. And if they aren't literate in their own language, how can you expect them to be able to translate all of that? And so I've been asking a lot that, you know, there's more video communication, more communication by phone, but then also not, you know, making the assumption that all immigrants have these challenges, because sometimes, you know, I think what happens is that we're very fortunate in that the immigrants that come here are probably the most hardworking people of their communities, and they are like the cream of the, you know, we're getting the best people. And so I think if we can make that assumption that, you know, even though some of us have different types of challenges, like let it be education or literacy, or but that all of those that are coming here because they're trying really hard, and they're willing to work hard. They just need, you know, we just need to try and understand and communicate with each other more. And so I'm really appreciative that you're having this discussion, because I so often feel like I'm, you know, trying to help the two sides communicate, and it's really challenging.
Thank you for those observations. Before we shift to Paula, could you just give a quick, like, brief explanation of what is DLAC? Because some people may not know what is the DLAC team, and since you're part of the DLAC, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit of what the DLAC team does.
So it's the District English Learner Advisory Committee.
Pues una de las primeras que hubiese yo querido es en cuestiones de la escuela, porque yo recuerdo, como Audrey mencionaba, que muchas veces, por ejemplo, mi niña vino acá a estudiar Kinder 1 y todo era inglés. Y yo decía las reuniones en inglés, prácticamente todo era en inglés. Yo con la maestra, cuando la conocí, pues obviamente ella inglés y yo español. Y me hubiese gustado de que no, digamos, las escuelas contaran con un intérprete, pienso yo, porque mi única ayuda en la escuela para mí fue Audrey y Miss Maxina, una de las maestras que está en la escuela Winship. Ellas fueron mis dos únicos apoyos en la escuela. Y quizá Audrey era una madre de familia. Yo recuerdo haberla conocido no sé si en un paseo, yo no me acuerdo muy bien, pero yo la conocí a ella y desde ahí ella me ha ayudado demasiado, porque cuando nosotros venimos, pues yo no tenía con quién contar, no tenía amigos, y entonces yo decía, ¿qué voy a hacer con mi nena? Y mi nena, todo para ella también es nuevo, ella no aún le cuesta, porque en la escuela, pues con todo esto del COVID, y entonces ella se ha atrasado un poco más, porque no es igual las clases presenciales que a distancia. Entonces, para mí eso hubiese sido mejor que, digamos, cada escuela quizá tuviera, bueno, usted es de tal país, mire, aquí tenemos a alguien con quien contar, usted puede expresar lo que siente, lo que necesita, qué apoyo es en el idioma de uno. Pero sí, eso a mí me ha costado demasiado con el idioma. Bueno, pues como les menciono, yo solo tuve a ellas dos que sí me ayudaron bastante. Yo decía, ¿qué hago con el bus? ¿En dónde es? ¿Qué pasa? Entonces todo eso, si hubiese sido o sería importante de que cada escuela quizá tuviera pues más de algunos intérpretes para poder apoyarnos a nosotros como papás sobre este país que es completamente diferente al de nosotros. Pero pues sí, también la escuela pues hace un gran trabajo y pues los entendemos que pues es su trabajo, pero a veces se olvidan de las necesidades de nosotros los inmigrantes, del no saber inglés, y eso pues es muy difícil y frustrante.
Thank you. So Paula basically shared about her experiences at the Winship School, and how Audrey, who's here with us, and one of the teachers, Miss Rosa, Maxina Rosa, have been instrumental in supporting her. how she felt a little bit of isolation, but having someone there to support her, and the friendships that she's had with Audrey and Maxina, and the support that they have been giving her has been helpful to her. She also shared about the challenges of remote learning with her child, and that the differences between remote learning and in-person learning, what those dynamics are, and what those challenges are. So thank you, Paula, for sharing. Audrey, before we transition to Yo-Yo and Nasra for our next questions, could you share a little bit about what is DLAC and your experiences as a member of DLAC, of the Winships DLAC?
So DLAC is a district organization that's kind of it brings together the Office of English Learners staff together with parents from BPS, and I think also it can also include other community members that are interested, and we try and I guess it's sort of a way for BPS to communicate with parents of English learners. So oftentimes they will share in meetings about different policies or different initiatives that they're doing to support English learner students. And then as parents, we oftentimes will give feedback or let them know about issues that that are coming up amongst English learner parents. I represent the Winship School, and so at the Winship School, we have a lot of parents from many different countries. Because I know a lot of the Spanish-speaking families have a lot of needs, we have a WhatsApp group where we share information with each other and let each other know when there's questions like, about school events, or sometimes like if we need help with homework, or sometimes if we need help with, somebody can't make it in time to pick the kids up, or also like during the pandemic, it's been a way to share resources like, where you can get food, where you can get different types of help for different issues. And we've been doing that, and I guess it's kind of part of what I feel like as a DLAC member, I try and represent families and get their feedback about different issues. And I think it's been really great in terms of being able to learn about a lot of resources that are available at the district level, because oftentimes I think communication between the district and the school, and then from the school to the parents, sometimes things get lost in the communication. And so it's a good way to connect the parents directly with the district. I think that's, and there's actually our next meeting, there's elections for the executive committee. So if any parents are interested that have English learners, I strongly encourage you to come and try it out.
Thank you for sharing. So Yo-Yo and Nasra, I just want to return to a point that Yo-Yo, you mentioned earlier on in the conversation about this year has only been a situation with the COVID pandemic, but we've also seen a rise in violence against our Asian community. We've also seen our young people protesting inequality. What is your community, what is your organization doing to support, or what suggestions do you have to support in these different issues?
So I should first what we have been doing. And before I say that, I want to highlight in Asian American Pacific Island is include more than 30 cultural ethnicity group, and it's just very diverse and complex. And before I just use adult education students from China, but I do want to mention about those TED is not only just Chinese, and you could be anybody on the street in a public space. If they think you are Asians, is a subject be a TED. So in the last few months, we hold a town hall meetings with different community members and also community organizations. And we also work with the city council at Frame office to try to establish more safe environment for our constituents coming back in the community. But I think it's everybody's effort. It's not only just city official or community organizations could do everything. I think if you see any attack happen, please report to the hate crime. And there's some campaign going on about stop API hate. And in May, and also is a celebrations about Asian America Heritage Month. I will highly encourage you to attend all this event, try to understand API community. And a lot of time, there's a stereotype about Asian America. In a general public, they think Asian are quiet, silence. If they see anything, they will not say anything. But I hope I will challenge those stereotypes. And because those stereotypes not only harm API community, but also harm other people of community. Just use model minority myth as a challenge, because the model minority stereotypes place Asian America high pressures about academic achievement, except the career pathway. But however, it's not all the Asian America are very good on academic, and not all Asian America have the resources to access a tutoring or any support. And people are silenced, it doesn't mean there are no issues. So I will highly encourage each one of us to learn more about API community and bring more empathy. And we need work together with Latino X and Black community to understand how we could address anti-Asian racism together, because we might not have enough tools. We need to learn from each other, but we also need to bring white allies to understand how we could work together to address this equity issues and racism in the community.
Thank you. And for Nazra, what recommendations or suggestions do you have as we have a lot of our young people have been out and they have seen what's going on and they are concerned and they have been raising their voice, whether it's through social media or in classrooms. What recommendations and suggestions do you have in this area?
As somebody who is like a minority on top of a minority, I'm Black, I'm Muslim. So I understand, of course, I understand where Asian Americans are coming from. And, you know, growing up in a very diversity like Boston, although I'm not Asian, so I couldn't have experiences, but I had a lot of Asian classmates who would complain about like all like the microaggressions that they were receiving. So I think the most important thing is to listen and just do whatever Asian Americans want us to do, because that's what I would appreciate in terms of like, you know, being Black and then also dealing with Islamophobia. My closest friend is Chinese and Vietnamese, and just through her, like not even this past year, but just through knowing her since middle school, I've just learned a lot about what it means to her, like for being Asian. And I just think that on top, like kind of talking about the model minority myth, there's so much more to Asians than academics. Like Yo-Yo was saying, like not every Asian is going to be good at math or anything like that. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Sorry, but yeah, so my friend, for example, has taught me a lot about her heritage and just what she loves about that. So I think on top of just listening to Asian Americans and validating their struggle, is also important to just appreciate that there's a variety of different people that are just under that umbrella.
Yeah. So do you have any final thoughts on how schools can support all of our young immigrant students from K-12 through the high school experience, regardless of, you mentioned some really valid points about being a minority on top of minority. So what recommendations or suggestions do you have for schools to support our young people who are immigrants?
Listening to their voices and then acting accordingly. Although it's not necessarily an easy thing to hear criticism, especially from the youth, because a lot of people don't see what the youth think as. They assume that the older you get, the more you know. But as somebody who has experienced a lot of microaggressions, I understand my oppression enough to speak about it. So I think number one is just to listen and then act accordingly. If people want a certain thing and they are the only people who've experienced it, there's no way I could really make any policies if I haven't experienced it myself.
Thank you. And for Maria and Audrey, since we're almost out of time, what main message would you like our educators and our participants here to take away on this subject?
For me, I believe that if we listen to each other closely, and then we step outside the box from what we see in front of us, it would make a great, great difference in our everyday lives. It doesn't have to be something huge, small little things. It would help a family go further than they would ever expect to go. Yeah.
Thank you. And Audrey?
I think, well, number one, the value of feeling and being heard is enormous. And just making an effort to try to hear and talk to people, especially before there's a problem. We have this one great teacher at Winship, Mr. Bowen, and he always tries to get to know families and talks to them, and I think it makes a huge difference. I also think just assuming or just being really careful about the assumptions that we make about each other, because as I said, those assumptions, even if they're not said, they are really felt, and especially our kids, they're very sensitive to those things, and what you expect about them makes a huge difference. And I think just trying to see parents as something that adds value to the education process. There's so many things that families do at home that really can contribute to education, to their learning. It may not look like the textbook type of learning, but it's still so important. And then at the same time, I think we parents have so much to learn from teachers. And so I just really would like to see those two worlds come together, because I think, number one, our kids will really benefit from it the most. I think of it as a kind of co-parenting. When we're co-parenting, we really need to be on the same page. So, yeah.
Thank you. And then for our last panelist, before we transition, we're about to transition to question and answer section. However, we want to just have our last two panelists share their final thoughts or a final recommendation that they'd like us to take away. What's a takeaway, Yo-Yo, that you'd like us to move away from this conversation with, from the community level? And then for Paula, what's a takeaway from your parent aspect?
I will echo back those two speakers mentioned about listen to the students and also put value on parents. And I think parents really want to communicate with the teachers, but sometimes they might not know how. And I just want to echo back Audrey. She mentioned about a lot of parents doesn't know how to navigate the systems. And I totally 100% agree. And sometimes when we provide the language asset, I think it's the first step, but try to understand parent doesn't have that concept because they don't grow up in United States. They might not know how to navigate the systems. So don't put on the assumptions that everybody, if you provide the language access, people will be able to fully participate, because that's take a lot of brain effort, try to understand and decoding every single step. So I think listening is the first step. And then second is those feedback or comment taking into actions. It could be a small step, but at least build on those small steps taking into actions, and family will really appreciate.
Thank you. And Paula, final word to you. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share or take away you'd like us to move away from as we get ready to transition to the question and answer session?
Pues como mencionaban de que oír a los niños y oír a los padres, porque yo les puedo decir que mi experiencia, yo a veces quisiera comunicarme con la maestra de mi niña, preguntarle cómo está, cómo le van sus clases, cómo yo puedo ayudarla a ella. Porque yo en mi país, yo gracias a Dios logré ser maestra de niños, pero en mi idioma. Entonces, en estos momentos choco con mi hija porque yo quisiera enseñarle, porque yo sé que para ella es difícil. Si es difícil para nosotros aprender un segundo idioma, pues para ella también. Y yo a veces quisiera preguntarle a la maestra de que si ella va mejorando o si está empeorando. Yo no sé en qué área está ella, pero como no puedo porque yo no hablo completamente inglés, porque me cuesta, entonces yo no sé cómo está su nivel académico de ella. Entonces, por eso yo menciono de que es importante, como mencionaba ahí la compañera, de saber escuchar al niño y saber escuchar a los papás. Porque yo cuánto quisiera saber y ayudar a mi niña, pero yo no sé, yo no puedo porque yo no sé cómo ni comunicarme con la maestra. Entonces, es algo que es muy difícil. Y otra de las cosas es de que aunque yo pudiera enseñarle en mi idioma, no en el idioma inglés, que porque yo tampoco no puedo. Entonces, yo no, es algo que choco contra ella, pues, porque yo no puedo, aunque yo desee. Otra de las cuestiones también es el apoyo como migratorio, porque nosotros estamos en un tiempo en donde si el juez determina por 5, 4 años, yo no sé, él determina y dice, no, ustedes no pueden estar más acá. Entonces, nosotros con mi esposo vivimos con ese miedo, con esa agonía de que quizá nos digan, no, ya no pueden estar acá. Entonces, nosotros decimos, ¿qué va a pasar? ¿Cómo vamos a nosotros poder tener ayuda de alguien para que mi hija siga con su escuela, mis 2 niñas sigan con su escuela? Entonces, es algo que pues es frustrante también saber de que no estamos tan seguros de estar en este lugar y que nos digan sí, que ella siga estudiando, o que nos digan no, ustedes tienen que regresarse para su país. Entonces, eso es algo que quizá no solo yo lo viva, sino que lo vivan muchos padres, estar pensando del poder estar acá o que nos digan que no podemos estar más acá.
Again, thank you, Paula. And thank you to all our panelists for sharing their insights on this theme of immigration. We appreciate all of your insight and your reflections and your recommendations on how we can support in this matter, support our young people, support our students in this matter. So we're going to transition to question and answer session. If you have a question, you can just unmute yourself and ask it of our panelists. Our panelists are Audrey, Paula, Yo-Yo, Nasra, Maria Barbosa. And for Paula, we have a little delay because we have an interpreter, just so you're aware. If you're asking a question and she's answering, just give a few seconds so the interpreter can do simultaneous. Any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question for our panelists or a suggestion or recommendation, or if you have a resource that you'd like to share.
Yes, I'll say it in English and in Spanish. The school has access to Lion Bridge, which is an interpretation.
Pues
line for
yo
parents.
quisiera mencionar, no sé si me escucha.
Sí, te escuchamos. Sí.
Así que no sé porque es difícil. Okay. Bueno, yo quisiera mencionar de que como les decía, de quizá poder, no sé qué posibilidades habría de que como estamos hablando de cuestiones migratorias, qué poder nosotros tener como un apoyo en cuestiones de estatus migratorio, ¿verdad? De que quizá no nos den tanto, pero que nos den la oportunidad de que nuestros hijos sigan su nivel académico y ellos puedan superarse sin tener el miedo o sin tener la preocupación de que nos digan de que ya no se puede estar más en este país. Porque yo como mamá les puedo decir que si en un tiempo yo voy con el juez de Boston, la jueza de Boston me dice, no pueden estar más acá, entonces yo diría, ¿qué hago? ¿Qué tengo que hacer? Entonces, es un miedo que quizá no solo yo lo viva, quizá hay muchos papás que lo viven, porque no sé si se contaría con el apoyo de las escuelas públicas de Boston para que digan, no, el niño tiene derecho a la educación.
So someone from our parent team, if you can respond or share a resource for, with Paula.
Sí, lo que quiero es preguntarle, señora Paula, sin tener que compartir tanta información acá. ¿Usted está buscando consejos del Departamento de Migración o un abogado? Yo voy a poner mi correo electrónico en el chat y nos podemos poner en contacto. Pienso que ya tengo su número de teléfono. ¿La podría llamar? La puedo llamar el lunes para averiguar exactamente qué usted necesita para saber a qué recurso señalarla.
Yo-Yo, do you have any resources that you might be able to put in the chat or you might be able to share with us in response to Paula's question?
Yes, can you translate Paula's questions?
I'm actually not clear what exactly she.
No pude escucharla.
I think at some point she wants to know what supports are there available if they try to get her child out of the school, that she wants to be able to say, no, my child's entitled to an education. So I'm not really clear exactly what it is. I'm going to offer to speak with her in private since, we're in a.
Yes, that's fine. Does your organization have a list of just frequently asked questions that are similar to Paula's question that you could share?
So I'm not quite sure of Paula's questions. My organizations work with Boston University. We developed a resource guide
Sí, está bien.
during the pandemic. So I could share that resource link. Let me just find the resource link chat. Okay.
All right. Thank you. As we're drawing to a close, we will be providing this recording and some resources on different questions that have been asked here.
Vera, can I just share about the Lion Bridge? I had started to earlier.
Yes.
I know Melody put it on the chat, but I want to say it in Spanish. En español, que les quería compartir que las escuelas públicas de Boston, el distrito tiene un acuerdo con Lion Bridge para proveer servicios de interpretación.
Sí, estoy escuchando.
Escucha, sí. Cuando usted esté en la escuela y necesite comunicarse con algún personal, maestra, director, y usted quiera hacerse entender, por favor, dígale que necesita interpretación. Aunque lo diga en español, lo van a entender. Ellos por obligación tienen que llamar a un número. Nosotros tenemos contrato con Lionbridge para proporcionarle ese servicio de interpretación a usted. A usted y a cualquier padre de escuela de Boston que necesiten interpretación.
All right, thank you. We have in the chat, Renee has shared the link to some information about Lions Bridge, that Boston Public Schools has an agreement with Lions Bridge to provide telephonic interpretation to schools in central office, and it's offered in over 350 languages. The DLAC team and the parent team also has a wealth of resources on their page that they can share in addition to this recording. And finally, Yo-Yo has shared some information in the chat section from the BU website on resources for families in the greater Boston area during COVID. Renee, thank you again to all our panelists for your participation today. Thank you for the audience for your questions. And again, this recording and some additional information will be made available to you. And our parent team also has a wealth of resources for our families on their website. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Sí, está bien.
Thank you, everyone. And for the mothers here, happy Mother's Day.
Gracias igual a todas.
Como se dice Happy Mother's Day.
Feliz Día de las Madres.
Feliz Madres.
Thank you, everyone.
Día de las Madres.